Wisconsin Eye is interviewing candidates in the special election in the 42nd Assembly District. Ann Groves Lloyd is the Democrat running. She's from Lodi. The general election is June 12th. The primary, which does not involve Ann, is May 15th. So, Ann, welcome to Wisconsin Eye.
Thank you very much, Steve. I appreciate it.
Give us the short version of your qualifications to represent the 42nd.
Short version of, well, I guess the local part of it, I'm fifth generation raised on our family farm. Have had a lot of experience with everything from small businesses to manufacturing to working at the university for the 30 years of my sort of professional career there. Mm-hmm. I've been on serving my second term on city council as an alderperson. I've been on the Utilities Commission for about 7 years, served on Public Works and Human Resources committees. I'm on the library board. Service has long been a part of my life. I served on executive boards and in president-elect, past president chains for a number of professional organizations. So I've held some elected positions through those organizations. Okay. I also spent 10 years working at the Alumni Association, which was all working with volunteers and boards of visitors, board of directors and things like that, which I've also used throughout my life. So I'm a public servant by nature. I have service very much in my blood. My father was on the faculty at UW-Madison in Ag and Applied Economics. My mother was a middle school teacher, so education also runs deep in our roots. And I just feel that my life experience has really led me to a place now where I can bring a lot to this position and to representing the 42nd District. It seemed like I really, a very visceral reaction to wanting to be a part of returning our state to the values that I grew up with.
Yeah, I want to ask you about that. On your website, you said one reason you're running is that Madison politicians have, quote, denied us democratic representation, close quote. Be specific. How?
By not fulfilling or not filling this representative position for our district. So yeah, that was a reference to the 42nd.
By the governor saying he wasn't going to call the special election, and then courts ordering him to.
And then yes, and the audacity of trying to rewrite the laws and make them retroactive so that we could go a year without representation. Rather infuriating.
Okay. Let's go down a few issues.
Sure.
Would you have voted for the Foxconn tax incentive?
Absolutely not.
Why?
I think it's a huge giveaway of our tax dollars to an entity that not only doesn't reside in Wisconsin, doesn't reside in this country. Not only is District 42 not going to benefit from it, all of us as taxpayers are going to be impacted. I think it's going to take a lot of resources away from schools and transportation issues that we need to address. Issues I'm really concerned about in our district: affordable health care, education, road conditions. I see a lot of dollars going down to create an infrastructure for a company where I question how many Wisconsin folks are actually going to be able to get jobs through that entity. I have a sneaking suspicion a fair number of folks from across the border will be employed at Foxconn. And I think a lot of our construction dollars are going to have to go down there to build the road infrastructure that they need. Meanwhile, our PASER ratings now are worse, and PASER being the scale for rating roads. Yes. Are worse now than they were in 2010 when Governor Walker was elected. So we have some dire needs in this state, and we should be thinking about taking care of those versus making the biggest tax giveaway in the history of the United States to a company that has, how do I say, not the best reputation for following through on their promises from what I've read.
Well, you mentioned roads are important to District 42.
Absolutely.
There's an impasse in the Capitol on how to pay for them. How should it be resolved?
I don't have any magic solution.
Would you raise gas tax, the registration fee? How about tolling?
I think minimally the gas tax should be indexed to cost of living increases. Decoupling that was a huge mistake, and it automatically makes the gas tax political when it's not indexed to something that's not political, like the cost of living. Again, I don't have any magic solutions. I think we have to look at the budget very, very carefully. Toll roads, there are certainly times when I'm driving in Illinois and think, I think we should have toll roads. The other side of it is, I think as Wisconsinites, we've been proud that we haven't had to do that and have still maintained our road infrastructure. The last 10 years have changed that, or the last 8 years. So being new to the state budget at this level, I need to do a lot of research yet before I can feel really confident about where I feel the funding should come from.
Your website also says we should provide everyone health care. How do you do that?
Honestly, I don't think profit has any business in healthcare.
Okay.
I think
should there be a universal plan?
I would love to see a universal plan for healthcare. Absolutely. I don't think it's I don't think healthcare is optional. I think it's a right to have access to what you need to live a healthy life. And I think a lot of the health problems in Wisconsin come from the fact that it is hard to access care in some areas, and it's expensive to access care, and people have to make the decisions between feeding their family or paying bills or rent or a mortgage versus sending someone to the doctor. And it would make the citizens of this state a lot healthier and a lot happier to not have that worry over their heads all the time about how am I going to take care of someone should there be an illness.
Do you see that what's been called the dark store controversy is a problem that should be solved? This is how closed retailers, banks, restaurants are assessed. Is that something you've taken a position on?
The darks, from my understanding of the dark store issue, they're trying to use the tax base that is used for the stores that are not functioning as the tax base for stores that are operational.
Yes, ma'am.
I think that's ridiculous. If your store is operational, you should be paying taxes like it's operational. This shouldn't even be an issue from a common sense perspective that we have to address. If the businesses don't pay the taxes, the citizens have to pay the taxes. And the average citizen in this state, I feel, hasn't been on the radar screen for a lot of our leadership for a very long time, and people are losing ground. People are having more and more trouble feeding their families. People are working 2 and 3 jobs. I see it every day. Et cetera. So sorry.
Part of that is the debate over the minimum wage. What should the minimum wage be in Wisconsin?
Well, I would favor, I don't know if I have an exact dollar amount, I would favor something that people could live on and feed their families. $15 has been the sort of dollar amount thrown out across the country. I think we need to look and see, for instance, what does someone need to make living in our district to be able to work 40 or 50 hours and still feed their family and not have to have 2 or 3 jobs. People who are working hard and paying taxes should be able to lead a life of dignity and be able to take care of their family working 40 or 50 hours a week. When you're forced to work multiple jobs, it's additional stress. It's stress on your family. You don't have time with your children. The ramifications of not paying people a decent wage trickle through communities in a multitude of ways. And I think you also get happier employees and more committed, loyal employees if you pay them a decent wage and ideally give them some paid time off.
The debate over school safety, of course, has prompted the debate over gun laws.
Yes.
Do we need changes in our gun laws?
I think we need some common sense around the AR.
Assault weapons?
Yes, thank you.
The AR-15s?
AR-15s, thank you. I forgot the number for a second there. I honestly, I have trouble finding a hunter who thinks that AR-17s are really a necessity for hunting. They are what is used in the vast majority of these mass shootings. Mm-hmm. And I think if bump stocks haven't been outlawed, they should be outlawed. I don't argue with anybody's right to have a gun in their homes or the concealed carry as long as they've gone through training. I'm wholeheartedly against arming people in school districts, and I think we just need to be sensible about what we're doing. And we have to do something, because what we're doing right now is not working. We are having mass shootings on a horrifyingly frequent basis.
Should there be background checks over
Absolutely.
private sales?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Is Wisconsin funding its public school system, our K-12 system, at an adequate level?
No, not at all.
How big of an increase, and how do you pay for that increase?
Well, I think one way is to start looking at what we're doing with private voucher schools. The vouchers that students take to these private schools,
Which are now statewide.
Which are
Started
now
in Milwaukee,
statewide.
Racine, now statewide.
So two issues with that. One is when we put the funding aside for schools, we take off the top the amount of money we need for the title programs, which is the way it was always done. And then in the past, what was left went to public schools. Now there's a second whack off of funding, cutting of funding from the general fund that goes to the private voucher schools. So a school, I believe right now, is getting somewhere in the neighborhood of $6,000 something for a student. If a student has a voucher and goes to a private school, it's fully funded at over $7,000, and those schools are not held accountable. And and special ed funding for students who have special needs. The state gives districts about 26% of what it costs for special education, and these private schools, again, that have absolutely zero accountability, are funded at 100% for what it costs for special education.
If you were in the Assembly in the next state budget, would you do away with statewide choice? Would you do away with it altogether? Would you let it continue in Milwaukee and Racine?
That's a difficult question. On one hand, I'd like to do away with all of them.
Okay.
If anything, if our public schools are not good enough, then let's figure out how to make our public schools good enough and accessible, and how to get teachers there who are qualified and competent and want to be there. We have a good public education has been a cornerstone for Wisconsin as for my entire lifetime, and our students should expect and should be able to expect a good education at their local public institution. When we don't fund our public schools properly, when we don't give children that education that they deserve, we miss out on the potential of every child in the state of Wisconsin. They all deserve to have a great education. So let's make sure the public system is properly funded and not siphon money off for schools that are not accessible to everyone, and yet everyone has to pay for them.
You spent much of your career at UW-Madison. Should we continue into a 7th and 8th year of a freeze on resident undergrad tuition?
No. We need to address the UW system funding from a much broader scale than just doing tuition freezes to help the cost of higher education. We all know that the best way for people to move up the socioeconomic ladder is access to education, higher education, whether it's an associate degree or a 4-year degree at an institution like UW-Madison. We are saddling this generation that we are so hopeful about being the next leaders in government, the future CEOs of our companies, start doing startups and things, and yet they're graduating saddled with crippling debt. And that makes no sense. That makes absolutely no sense.
Should they be able to refinance that debt?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And we need to figure out a way to decrease that debt responsibility. I'm sometimes embarrassed to think about what I paid for tuition, and it was very, very modest, and that was, it was like 35 years ago, but I think we just have to look at education in the long term as an economic investment in the state and as an investment in, again, the potential of every citizen, and do what's right for our children. And
another priority on your website is we need to reverse the trend of getting away from clean government.
Yes.
What do you mean?
When I grew up in this state, we would laugh at the folks south of the border for the corrupt government that they had. And Wisconsin was well known for its transparent government, its very strict laws regarding lobbying and campaign finance. And we were known as a state that was clean, not corrupt. This administration has done a lot to take us far away from those principles. The Government Accountability Board, the elections oversight, darkening some of the sunshine rules on public records, meeting in closed session with no records of what's happening. This is not how government should be done. Our citizens pay for the government. They have every right to know what we're doing. And we should be doing everything we possibly can to encourage people to participate in this democracy, and that includes getting them in the voter booth.
17 years later, talk to me about your reaction to Act 10. It all but eliminated collective bargaining. It made public employees pay more for pensions and health care. Was it wise public policy?
Absolutely not.
Both parts?
Say again, both parts.
Both parts, the changes to collective bargaining and making public employees pay more for pensions and health care.
So,
what do you think the effect of Act 10 is 7 years later? Let's
sure.
do that.
Okay. I will say, state employees, as a state employee myself, I always felt we should be paying something for our benefits. The way it was enacted came at a time with zero salary increases, and this amounted to about an 8% reduction in our take-home pay. And as someone who has had 1% raises since 2010, I am taking home less now than I was in 1999. And it's pretty difficult to keep people around. So paying more for benefits is one thing if it doesn't mean that we take this automatic giant decrease in what we're taking home in pay. As far as busting the unions goes, you can see the impact of that everywhere in our school systems, in hiring people in the trades. There's in the city of Lodi, where I'm an alderperson, we had to pay to have a company come in and create pay ranges and job descriptions, which were often provided by the union. We worked with the union on not our job descriptions, but classifying job descriptions and pay scales that went and clear rules about how people could move up pay scales. We've all had to invent that and create that now, and that's expensive. It's not a cheap proposition, so that's additional costs that we've had to pick up. I think people are much less excited about being in the public sector. I think we're facing a teacher shortage. The applications for some state jobs are going unfilled. Well, the applications aren't unfilled. The positions are going unfilled. Working for the state is not as attractive as it used to be. And when we're vilified as being sort of, I'm trying to think of a polite way to say this. Those of us who work in the state system or work for the state in public service are taxpayers too. And I was always pretty proud of the way that we stretched $1 in serving our students and being good stewards of the taxpayers' money. And the last 10 years have been devastating from a morale standpoint, or 8 years from a morale standpoint. I've seen phenomenal faculty members have to leave the university because they no longer feel comfortable in this state. They don't feel like their job prospects or their career prospects are going to go anywhere, or at least not where they thought they were going to be able to go at a research institution like UW-Madison.
I see.
So it's been devastating, absolutely devastating.
We're almost out of time, and you don't know who your Republican opponent's going to be on June 12th.
I don't.
But why are you more qualified as the Democratic candidate?
I think a lot of it is life experience. Having been a locally elected official, worked in, it's not state government per se, a large state-run bureaucracy like the UW-Madison. I know how things work. At this point in my life, I feel like the myriad of experiences I've had from being a property manager. My husband was the superintendent of the Lodi Canning Company for 43 years. My parents owned a flower shop in Lodi. We owned some rental units in Lodi that my husband and I manage. So I think I bring a broad mix of experiences and education. All three of my degrees are from UW-Madison, and just a real passion for helping those who have not had a voice the last 8 years get heard loud and clear.
Thank you. Ann Groves Lloyd of Lodi is the Democratic candidate in the special election in the 42nd Assembly District. The general election will be June 12. And thank you so much for coming to Wisconsin.
It's been a pleasure, Steve. Thank you so much.
Thank you.